I think first off, it was a full board meeting, which is always important. We have our monthly meetings, but the focus of attention was on the board's response to the proposed budget cuts in the executive budget. As we know, the governor does not like the budget that he's forced to present, but that's what it is under law. So we are looking at a $300 million cut between TOPS, GO grants, and dollars for our operating budget, which is significant. So the board was very vocal about making sure that we bring that to the attention of legislators and the public, and hopefully get some redress.
We're talking about this amazing budget shortfall that's crippling to our institutions, and our pie-in-the-sky hope is that the legislature could figure out a way to get us back to where we were last year, which is dead last in the Southern Regional average, which has a 1.5, probably more than that now, in a maintenance backlog for our crumbling infrastructure. And that's our goal. How sad is that when we need so much more? And guess what? Last year's numbers are still, about 60% of the numbers, dollar for dollar, 10 years ago. Yeah. For what this state does to support higher education. And when you had this graphic, I asked Carolyn to give it to me, talking about, heck, if you don't care about people, if you don't care about education, dollars and cents tells you better fund your higher education, because it's going to pay off in the long run.
Right.
Terrence,
Thank you.
we could ask Mr. Chairman one more question. Terrence, to just kind of bring home the fun. Would you go to the next one, the unfunded mandate part? That mandated cost increase. That's standing still. We're going to go in the hole. $10 billion on top of the mandated cost that we're already taking each year.
Correct.
To the point where we are now sending back 74% of any dollars that each unit is on balance across the systems. 74 cents of every dollar from the state goes back to the state for these mandated costs. The most outrageous part of it, though, is that every other agency in the state gets their mandated cost increases covered each year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Everyone but higher education.
The last time higher education received mandated cost accommodations was in 2004.
Like that.
I'm sorry, 2008. 2008.
Around 2008.
Yes.
So not only is this a problem, we have been singled out to yet take another hit on top of the general reductions in state funds, then this insidious and hidden cost of $10 million more dollars. What is the total cost of the mandated expenses we're sending back?
$640 million?
$640 million of the money we get goes back.
And our flagship's a donor.
Yeah, and many of the
institution. I think our flagship is.
Regent David is correct. There are 2 or 3 or 4 institutions that are giving back more than they're getting.
Yep.
What kind of business model is that? They ask us to run like a business, and then they do that? It is inconsistent with logic that we would be talking about mandated cost increases, increasing only for higher education and no one else.
There's more
When you get
institutions.
the chance to express your concerns to your legislator, start there.
Yeah,
Because nobody can find that to be fair. No one, not even them.
Again, let me, and I'm recognizing in just 1 second, Mr. Seal. I want everybody over here to understand and be clear. You made a great point, Regent David, about just getting back. We should never be happy with just getting back to where we were last year. But last year was the first year in 10 years, in 9 years, that we were fully funded. 10 years ago, our budget was $1.5 billion, Terrence?
That's correct.
And today it's 740,
Without TOPS, that's correct.
yeah, without top, 740 million.
That's if we get the revenue.
Yeah, exactly. So
Right now it's less.
keep that in mind, members. That's a tough nut to crack. And I don't ever want to be satisfied with getting back to where we were last year. We ought to not only fund higher ed, but fund it ahead of a lot of more these other programs that we're funding. Mr. C, go ahead.
Just a quick note, not to interfere with Terrence's presentation, but the other thing to keep in mind is you mentioned $1.5 billion 10 years ago. The mandated costs at that point were about $250 million. So we had about $1.3 billion to allocate. Now, if you take the mandated costs out, we have about $232 million to allocate. So the number has gone from $1.3 billion to about $232 million. That's the dramatic number that we have to focus on. Thank you.
Yeah. And Mr. Seal?
Mr. Guillen, we have all seen the efforts to lament the proposed budget cuts, but I don't know that we have seen any product by the Board of Regents or the staff of the Board of Regents to explain to the legislature the probable consequences of the cuts, either system-wide or institution by institution. My question would be, would it lie within the expertise of your department to begin to explain the consequences of the budget cuts and to let the legislature understand just how serious the matter is, especially for some of the poorer funded schools?
Regent Field, thank you very much for that question and for asking me that for the benefit of the entire committee. We have worked with public affairs for years now. We've provided numerous publications to the legislature on that, and I'm happy to send you all a packet of all the information that we have shared with them over the years. It's not for a lack of effort or a lack of telling them, it's a lack of them listening. So we have provided several public announcements, rallies, you name it. We've done that, and we've shared with them the effects of the cuts. And we have, again, pamphlets, brochures, videos, rallies. We've done that since I've been at Regents for the last 5 years. And I'm happy to share that with you and the entire board. And take your suggestions on a different direction if you have such, any.
Yeah, I just, Regency, also want to mention that when we testify in front of appropriations and finance, what normally will happen is I will go first and give a broad overview presentation, and each of the system presidents will come in and oftentimes campus by campus talk about where they are, what they are going to have to do, and the impact it has on students. So that information is made very visible and very public. Sadly, the legislators have not listened to it. Yeah.
But anything else to add? I think we ought to bring it to another level. We got our system heads, we got our chancellors and presidents coming to the legislature every time we do that. I would like everyone on this committee, on this board, and every university, and every professor, and every student to have a copy of this chart that shows what higher education does, and have those people combined with what Regent Seal said is going to cost Nichols State $300,000 or $400,000 like it has in the last 10 to 15 years. But by doing that, we're going to lose our marine biology program, or we're going to lose the money that we have for our arts program with the brand new Danos Theater we have at Nichols that everybody's doing. That, we're going to lose stuff at Louisiana Tech in engineering that we've been providing so well, at LSU, and Southern and Grambling. I think it's very important that we take this list right here and show them and hit people in the nose with it. And when it's time for the budget hearing for education, don't just have the presidents and the system heads there. Have board members from our board, from all the system boards. Have the professors, have the students. I mean, heck, I would call a day off for that. They have not got the message from people, but yet they wanted to change the name of a school in Natchitoches for a member that sat next to me, Representative Long, and I had representatives say, I got 200 letters. I can't vote for that. But you have this that's going to affect everybody. And they're not even blinking. They're not even blinking. We need to bring the heat. We need to make these people understand what it is. We need to make these legislators know. And if you get enough of their people from their district, if you get enough people that donate to their campaigns, in them hallways, when it's there, trust me, Senator Ewing, Representative McDonald, we've been there. We know what it's like. But if we don't bring the heat, but when the last thing we had that presentation where they showed the percentage of, if you have a college education, the percentage of jobs, how many of those people actually get employed versus the ones, the non. And then you drop down to the community college, then you drop down, it's stunning.
What kind of an impact would cuts of that magnitude have on higher education in Louisiana?
Well, the magnitude is enormous, but it's also basically the fact that we've been taking budget cuts for 10 years. And so I said, 10 years ago, we basically were able to allocate $1.2 billion. This year, before the budget cuts, with all the costs that we have incurred, we are basically down to about $230 million. So our institutions are suffering from a lack of support from the legislature, and instead now the students on the tuition is really what's bringing in the dollars to allow them to operate, and that's a sad state of affairs when you call them public higher ed.
Talk a little bit about the impact of such costs as mandated costs and what that means for the budget of all the public universities in the state.
Right. Well, mandated costs is just like a business. You have retirement costs, you have health care, things along those lines, but we have no control over them, and they have accelerated dramatically over the past years. And so, for whatever reason, higher ed is the only agency in the state where the annual increases are not covered by the budget. We are forced to basically put those additional increases out to each of the campuses. So we suffer. Even if the budget stayed the same, we're looking at another $10 or $15 million decline because of the fact that we have to pay the mandated cost. To put it in perspective, 75 cents out of every dollar that we get goes back to the state for mandated costs, leaving 25 cents for instruction, faculty salaries, labs, internships. That's where we are.
A high-profile price tag for higher education is the TOPS program. If TOPS were to be fully funded, what would that mean for the rest of higher education?
Well, that's a really interesting question because TOPS has to be funded from somewhere, the general fund, and they're looking at about $240 million. We would expect that the legislators find that elsewhere. My concern, quite frankly, is that they would reduce the operating budgets to fund TOPS. And as I pointed out, if you don't have faculty, if you don't have classes, if you don't have internship opportunities, a TOPS scholarship doesn't do you much good.
What is already happening with the spiral of students making decisions on to enroll in the fall, and also faculty?
Well, both very good questions. In other words, we're right now in March. February, March, and April is when students decide whether they're going to attend a university and where. So by the fact that they are looking at an 80% budget cut in TOPS and a 50% budget cut in Go Grants, we know a lot of students are either not going to attend or the students are being courted by out-of-state universities. Same thing with faculty. Why would I want to come to a state where you've not had faculty increases in salary for years, where the benefits packages are lower to begin with, in fact we're the lowest in the South, and at the same time you have uncertainty about whether my position will even be there. So we're not being able to attract and retain the best faculty.
Where does Louisiana rank in terms of funding higher education compared to other southern states and states across the country?
Well, the southern states, the Southern Region Board, are the ones we compare ourselves to, the roughly 12 or 13 institutions that are from Virginia through Louisiana. We rank either at the bottom or near the bottom in everything from financing to graduation rates to the only reason we don't rank at the bottom is in debt burdens, because historically Louisiana has had low tuition. Now that's changing also, so students are having to incur more debt. So we are at the bottom of the Southern Board, and we are also number 49 or 50 and the bottom from national rankings.
During the legislative session, the case is going to be made for the value of higher education. What is the value of higher education in Louisiana?
Well, the value is an economic imperative. In other words, if this state wants to progress toward the future, you have to be able to fill the jobs that are coming here and attract businesses, and that takes a talented and educated workforce. Without universities, that workforce won't exist.